are Labour. And I spoke to the Green candidate in the Calder Valley, which went to Tory. It's a constituency just past between Halifax and the Pennines. And one or two sort of social worker type Labour Party members in Hebden Bridge said, well, them sort of people don't exist anymore. And the Green candidate says, I'm sorry, there's hundreds and hundreds of them. Because when I've knocked canvassing for Greens, that's what people say. Well, I agree with everything you're saying, but I'm sorry, we're Labour. He said, we are Labour here. And we're in a situation now, I can't believe this. This is a picture from the Daily Telegraph on Tuesday. I'm an avid Daily Telegraph reader, I'm ashamed to say. This is a picture of, I don't know where this prep school is, of David Cameron in the Christmas play. He's playing Harold the Rabbit. I haven't heard of Harold the Rabbit, but you are talking to a bloke who once filled a questionnaire in on television, who was the world's most famous rabbit, and everybody I know in Wakefield entered and put down Bugs Bunny, and the answer was Peter the Rabbit, and I'd never heard of him. So this is Harold the Rabbit. I don't know where Harold the Rabbit is, out of Toad Hall. And next to him is Mole. And the Mole is Prince Edward. And in the third row of the school play is the Queen. And that's who's representing ordinary working people in Britain today. Somebody who was in a play with Prince Edward, who was trying to make out that they're not a toff, that they are. And when you look at the list of candidates, sorry, the characters in the play, I can't believe this is going back to when I was a kid. He's described as Harold the Rabbit, played by Cameron Minor. Now, I've never heard of them expressions. I tell you, it was Uncle Tom's school days. Tom Brown's school days, sorry. And that's the situation we're in at this moment in time. We're in a situation where two public school boys pretend that they disagree with the banking system. Nick Clegg's grandfather was the president of ABN Bank, the biggest bank in the Netherlands. His grandmother was Baroness so-and-so, who was related to the Attorney General of the last Tsar government in Russia. And his dad is the chair of the United Trust Bank. These people don't criticise banks. They live on the outcome of the banks that's taken off ordinary working people. And we need to have this debate, because they would tell you about the bad old days. Now, I'll tell you about the bad old days. My mother came from Croydon in Surrey. My grandmother came from Croydon in Surrey. When she was 11 years old in 1913, she went into service in Doncaster as a servant. In 1913, the biggest single occupation in Britain was not coal mining. It was domestic service. That's what it was. And when she was 11 years old, she left Croydon in Surrey and went to Doncaster and never saw her mother again in the next 20 years. And they gave her Mother's Day off to think about her mother. And that's where they made their money. That's where they come from in the public school system that they represent. The public school system did three things for these people. It introduced, in 1880, the apostrophe. And it drives working people mad because they don't know where to put it. Because it's been invented by the middle classes to torture the working classes. They haven't a clue where to put it. It invented the regionalist accent. You can't tell where they come from. You cannot tell where these people come from because they have it driven into them that they belong to a class, not a region. And they're taught that they run society. They're the three primary reasons for going to public school. And if Tony Blair hadn't resigned, three public school boys would have been there telling us who we should vote for. And they don't disagree on anything. They absolutely don't disagree on anything. And what is the situation? The situation is Lloyd Blankfein, who is the chair of Goldman Sachs Bank, said in 2007 the main reason for what he did, he was doing God's work. That's what he said he was doing. He said at the inquiry the other week in America that he saw no contradiction in the fact that he was recommending clients to buy products that his other arm of his company were invested against, that they were going to go down. He saw no moral contradiction in that. And his forerunner, Sid Weinberg, who ran Goldman Sachs in the 1930s to the 1960s, said the policy of Goldman Sachs is really clear, long-term greedy. And that's what they are about. And you might think, and some of our members might not think that that's not relevant to this election, but it's absolutely relevant. Because in the next 2 years, somebody's going to come to the local government workers and say, you've got the fourth biggest pension scheme in the world. And it is full of money, and we want it. Because in the 1980s, they made their money out of privatisation. In the 1990s, they made it out of deregulation. In 2000, they made it out of PFI, and they made it out of lending money to people who couldn't afford to pay it back. And what they're going to do now, which is what they've been doing for the last fortnight, is working out what parts of the public sector they are going to carve up. Because they're not going to cancel Trident, and they're not coming home from Afghanistan, and they're not going to build nuclear weapons, and they're not going to replace the nuclear power stations. They're going to rob the earnings of ordinary working people. And we didn't get, when we went to work in 1973, when I started working in 1973, I was just lucky. I could have gone to started work 20 years early, it would have been a different world. We weren't special because we had jobs and pensions. We were lucky for the era we lived in, and they want to take that era off us. And they tell us about the bad old days when Cameron's family and Clegg's family made the money. They tell us them days are gone. They're not gone. Children still go down the mine. People still die of thousands of work-related diseases. They just don't do it in this country. Because of transport, they can do it in Colombia and India and China. The ruling classes live on the same wealth that they've always lived on, that just that cheap transport costs mean they can do it elsewhere. And what stops them doing it here? Organised labour. That is the only difference, and that's the theme of my campaign, is organisation. It's got to be about organisation. It's not about having fancy chats in curry houses and pizza about putting the world to right, even though we all do that. It's about organising, because if that's what the working classes understand, intrinsically, working class people join a union for one reason, because they will be better off together than they would be apart. Intrinsically, all workers understand that. And we've got a situation where if there's no money, why did 37 chief executives leave local government in the last 18 months with an average payout of £256,000 each? One chief executive from not far away from where I live got a £540,000 last year's salary when he left the council in 2007, and he's now earning £200,000 a year as a chief executive in London, and 1 million local government workers and have had a pay rise offered of 0%. And I keep saying to people, can you explain this to me? What's the difference between having no offer and having an offer of 0%? Mathematically, I can't see the difference. But that's the world we're now living in. And that's the world post-general election that isn't about who went here and who went there and who's patting who on the back. It's not about that. It's about real things. When you go into pubs and cinemas and libraries and talk to real people, they talk about real things, don't they? They don't talk about the rubbish that politicians talk about on the telly. And I like real things. There's a bloke I despise called Michael Winner. I think Ken Loach were here now, he despises him as much as I do. But he was on Question Time the other week, and he gave the best answer I've ever seen on Question Time in the last 5 years. They asked him if they thought the Americans and the British should bomb Iran if they had nuclear weapons. And the politicians all down the line said, oh, I'll have to think about it, we don't know what we've got, which means they've got to ask the bankers. And they got to Michael Winner, and they said to Mike, he couldn't stop laughing. He could not stop laughing. And I thought, you prat, what are you going to say? And what he said was spot on. He said, we're not going to Iran because they have got nuclear weapons. We like to go in first to make sure they haven't got them before we attack them for having them, like we did in Iraq. But in Iran, they've definitely got them, so we won't be going there. And he said, next question, please. And we're in a situation now where there'll be another general election in the next 2 years, without a shadow of a doubt. And the Liberals have made the worst mistake they could possibly make. They will be destroyed as a party for what they've done, because their rank and file that voted in favour of coming out of Afghanistan, their rank and file that voted against not replacing Trident, won't be supported. They can't believe it. You know, I speak to ordinary Liberal voters who are as anti-Tory as I am, right? They are absolutely depressed about what's going to happen, and this government won't last 18 months. It cannot last 18 months. And I think some of the strategists wish that the Tories hadn't gone into a coalition with the Liberals. But that's where we are. And our members are sat there thinking, and I'll tell you what the mixture of emotions of our members is in the public sector. It's a mixture of depression, anxiety, and anger. It's them three things, and it could go either way. They're watching at the moment, they're watching to see what's going to happen.